Hello, my name is Zach Kazan. I'm the managing editor at Worn and Wound. This is a new episode of Time on Screen, our podcast where we chat about movies and watches and where those things intersect. I'm really happy to be joined today by my friend and colleague, Kyle Snar. Kyle, how's it going?
It is going great. Always glad to be back on the show. You know, it's one of my favorite things out there to do is be on your show, man.
Returning champion of Time on Screen, back again. Always happy to have you. We're very lucky in our company to have a bunch of, really great like movie buffs, I think. So it's nice to have you guys kind of like filter in and out of the show. But I always enjoy chatting with you, Kyle, about movies. It's just
right back at you.
Yeah. Today we're talking about a movie I've seen a bunch of times and have never really thought of it as a watch movie, but you brought me some information on how a watch kind of like fits into this movie. And I think it's like interesting to talk about. It's a fun movie, interesting kind of like time capsule movie from about a decade ago. We're talking about World War Z from 2013, directed by Mark Forster. Big kind of like star vehicle for Brad Pitt. We're going to do a quick wrist check. I'll go first because I know that your wrist check is kind of like pertinent to the movie, and mine is definitely not. I'm wearing a James Lamb Origin series today. Just
cool
the watch I picked up almost a year ago now that I really love.
That's the one that has. Is that the one with the offset dial a little bit?
Yep, it has an offset dial. It has so the dial is white ceramic, and then that's enamel kind of like surrounding it, and the case is silver, Argentium silver. So just a really unique kind of handmade watch, really beautiful. So
does it take hits pretty well, or does it have a couple of nice little patina like scratches?
Oh no, it definitely it patinas for sure. I mean, it's silver, so it's pretty soft. It'll scratch. But Argentium silver is a little bit different from traditional like sterling silver in that it's not meant to like patina to like a full black. Like if you think about like your like grandmother's silver or whatever, like it just turns black over the course of like years and years. That is not supposed to happen to this silver alloy. It has like a special Argentium silver like polishing cloth that kind of like takes the patina off, and it looks brand new once you take a cloth to it. So cool. Interesting material. It's it's a precious metal. It's fun. It's a cool piece. I really feel lucky to own it because it's such a kind of like unique handmade watch.
Awesome. Yeah.
What are you wearing?
Very different from what I'm wearing today.
Yeah, I know. We're on opposite ends of the spectrum here.
Yeah. I'm wearing a watch that looks and feels like it's made for the zombie apocalypse, and what we'll find out is it very well might be just that. So I'm wearing today a Terra Cielo Mare. It's their orienteering quota 8611. So this is a completely overbuilt field watch that's designed and inspired by the first Italian expedition to K2. It is got a Swiss Sellita automatic movement in it. It's this matte black, military-esque watch with an internal compass bezel. It's got a big, beefy Italian leather strap, kind of from that, I would say a little bit from, the Panerai vibe, if you will.
Sure.
We were introduced to this brand from our good friends at D1 Milano. They came to Wind Up New York. They had a wonderful time and really got to see what the enthusiast crowd is all about. And they really felt compelled that this other brand that they share ownership of would be a good fit for us. And I'm really glad they brought it to us because I think some of us had heard about this brand before, Terra Cielo Mare, or TCM, not to be confused with Turner Classic Movies. But this is a really cool brand and a really cool vibe. And I think the most exciting thing about this watch is its older brother is actually featured in this film.
Yeah.
So when I heard that, being the head of partnerships that I am, I quickly mentioned that we have this wonderful franchise, Time on Screen, and asked if they'd be interested in sponsoring this episode, which they agreed to. So this episode is brought to you all listeners by Terra Cielo Mare. So yeah, I love this overbuilt watch. I think one thing that is interesting is that it's a 44 millimeter watch, which sounds big. I have a 6-inch wrist, not big at all. but this thing seats and fits perfectly on my wrist. And I think because the very, very short lugs, it works just really, really well. It doesn't feel big. It doesn't feel, too oversized. One thing that is really striking about this watch is that both the primary crown and the compass crown are probably the largest like diameter crowns I've ever seen on a watch. Like never seen them this big. They're huge and they're really satisfying to grip. And it makes
kind of makes a big difference with a large crown. Like it's a very different experience than a normal size crown or a small crown on like a little dress watch or something. It's
exactly.
a much more tactile thing.
Exactly. They're not long and they are, like you said, very tactile. So this is a fun watch. It's very interesting to wear, and we're going to be doing some fun content in addition to time on screen with this watch that we can mention at the bottom of the show. But yeah, we're really grateful to TCM for sponsoring this episode.
Yeah, that's very cool. This is a brand that I'll be honest, I was not familiar with at all when you brought it to me. It was just not on my radar. And I've kind of like looked into it a little bit. It's a very interesting brand. And the D1 Milano guys are great. Like they are doing really interesting things. So the fact that this brand is connected to D1 is sort of that feels like an endorsement to me, because D1 is just like doing some very interesting stuff in terms of their sort of like avant-garde kind of like design forward pieces. So
totally.
So yeah, that's great.
Cool. Yeah, and it just gives us a chance to talk about this movie that I'm a big fan of too, so we can get into it and pick it apart and loves and hates and all those good things.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting movie. Like I said, it came out in 2013, but it was sort of one of those development hell movies for years before that. It had kind of gone through like multiple screenplay drafts, and like many different people were attached to it over a kind of a long period of time. It's based on a novel, World War Z, written by Max Brooks, who's the son of Mel Brooks. Kyle, I wanted to ask before we even start really talking about the background. Are you familiar with the novel, or have any experience with any Max Brooks work?
So yes and no. So I have not read the full novel. I know about it quite a bit, that it is structured more like journal entries and kind of almost like found footage sort of material, but a book. I am actually in the process of reading a different Max Brooks book, which is called Devolution. I don't know if you've heard of this, but it's a similar book about kind of found documents about a war with Sasquatches.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm in the middle of that book right now.
That's sort of Max Brooks's wheelhouse. He's very he's on faculty at West Point, I believe, or was at one time. He teaches classes on war and like lectures and writes about war. And he also has this comedy background, because he writes comedy. He was he was a part of the Saturday Night Live writing team at one point, and obviously has this like illustrious sort of like like comedy family lineage. But he's also someone who is like very knowledgeable about like like the mechanics of war, and like you'll see him like pop up on like cable news shows and things from time to time talking about like worldwide conflicts and things. He's a very very well respected kind of like scholar for this stuff, and he kind of like filters it all through like zombie fiction and Sasquatch fiction as well. So like really interesting character. I have not read World War Z, but I'm familiar with the structure. Like you said, it's a kind of like a series of like firsthand accounts, like reports to like the United Nations. I think sort of like how it's framed, of a war that's like in the past. And my understanding of the original screenplay for World War Z is that it was written in a similar way that the novel was, and sort of like captured that like that sort of structure of the novel, and was really kind of influenced by like 70s conspiracy thrillers. Like All the President's Men is a movie that sort of comes up in conversation sometimes when you're talking about the original script for World War Z. And over a period of time, that script was scuttled and rewritten as basically a star vehicle for Brad Pitt. And I think Max Brooks is kind of like said that like the current version of World War Z is not like a good representation of what he was originally trying to get on screen. So you've got a little bit of that sort of like, we talked about it with Stephen King and The Shining on a previous episode of Time on Screen, like the author sort of trying to distance himself from the adaptation.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty interesting adaptation. I think there's just certain stories that work really, really well in a novel format that don't translate well into movies, and I think we have to be honest about that. And I for me, this works in terms of communicating the essence of what he's trying to get across. So yeah, it's interesting for sure.
No, I think so too. It's still. I think the original intent of the movie and based on the the Max Brooks kind of like version of the script, if you will, that would have been a very different kind of zombie movie. What we end up with is still a pretty different kind of zombie movie and not a traditional zombie movie by any means. Do you have a particular affinity for zombie movies, Kyle? Is this like a genre that is meaningful to you in any way?
No, I do not. I have a really hard time with kind of post-apocalyptic movies in general. I think I take them far too literally and far too fearfully. Mm-hmm. But I have a couple movies in the zombie genre that I absolutely adore. And one of them being Shaun of the Dead. So I think
that's a good one. Yeah.
The kind of the humor side of poking fun at the genre kind of is a little bit more up my alley. But I love action thrillers, especially globe-trotting action thrillers. I mean, I think those are some of my favorite kinds of movies, like these kind of like in the dark operators who are, jet setting around the world to solve, mysteries. Like all that really appeals to me, mm-hmm. a lot. And kind of this movie's more that than zombie movie in some respects.
Yeah, no, very much so. It's sort of, the movie has like an episodic quality to it. It's basically like Brad Pitt kind of like in a series of different locations, like solving a series of different challenges that kind of allows him to like put the puzzle pieces together to, like solve a specific zombie problem. I'm also like I'm not like huge into zombie movies. I love horror movies, which is sort of like a, like tangential, I think, to the zombie genre. And I have respect for the Romero movies, Dawn of the Dead and
sure.
Day of the Dead and Night of the Living Dead. Those are all, I have nothing bad to say about those movies. They for whatever reason they just don't like resonate with me emotionally. I will say that a movie like this that I think takes a more like a slightly more grounded view mm-hmm. on like a zombie scenario resonates a little bit more strongly after the pandemic, which is I think something that we can probably talk about
a little bit
during this conversation, because you live through the pandemic and you start to see parallels in all sorts of movies, and I think there's a natural link with the zombie stuff for sure.
This was interesting for me too, because before this movie I don't know if I ever thought about zombies as fast. I just thought about slow zombies, and fast zombies and slow zombies, they're a different kind of scary, man.
These are very athletic zombies for sure. What's your zombie apocalypse strategy? Like if you find yourself in a World War Z kind of situation, what are you doing?
I'm going to take
high ground, or what's
I'm taking
strategy?
A page right out of my favorite actor's book, which is Bill Murray, who shows up for a great cameo in Zombieland, where he essentially just paints himself like a zombie and like starts moaning and going with the horde. I think that's my strategy.
Yeah. I'm just going to submit right away. I don't care to be the last man standing in the zombie apocalypse. I think I'll just kind of like resign myself to my fate.
It's just like finding a group of enthusiasts that you want to join, and all of a sudden they invite you in, and you can join in their activities. It's great.
Yeah, I've just always kind of wanted to be part of the club,
Yeah, and just be accepted. Yeah.
Zombies will let you do that, which is a nice thing. When did you first come across this movie? You see this in theaters when it came out?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about two instances, if that's cool.
Yeah.
The first time I saw it in the theater with my wife, we are both huge Brad Pitt fans. We just go where he goes and see what he does, and we're generally in. And we can talk more about that, the power of that attraction, right? And so we saw it in the theaters, had a fun, rip roaring, slightly scary time with it, and enjoyed it, and kind of just, I don't know, put it kind of filed it away pretty quickly. It was really my second viewing, which, per your point a moment ago, was with when we introduced my son to this movie in the middle of the pandemic. We fired it up, in 2020 watched it with my son, and man, oh man, that made for a memorable experience, to the point now where I've rewatched this movie multiple times in the last 4 or 5 years, like multiple times. And I don't know, and we can unpack this a little bit, but I cannot figure out for the life of me, except for one kind of boring answer, why this movie is so infinitely rewatchable.
Yeah, I remember seeing it in the theater when it came out, because like this movie was a pretty big deal in 2013 when it came out. It was highly anticipated. The book was super popular. Brad Pitt is kind of I don't know if you'd say he's at the peak of his stardom at that point, but he was like, he's a big star, in 2013 for sure. And, I saw it, and I honestly, like, I walked out of the movie, and I didn't think, oh, this is like a modern classic or anything. If I remember correctly, what I thought was there were some like missed opportunities probably, in the movie. And we can talk about some of the shortcomings. But over the years, it's become one of those movies that's sort of like a cable mainstay. It's always on. It's always streaming somewhere, and it has this like kind of like inherent watchability to it. I think because like the production values are so high, like all of the set pieces are executed really well,
very memorable.
Yep, very memorable. Brad Pitt is like a very, like, he just has this, like, obviously like movie star quality that you want to watch. And it also is like part of this kind of like late class of movies that you don't really see much anymore. That's like, it's really shot on location in like a bunch of different places. Like you really do have like a globe trotting feeling to it. And there's something, for me that I think is a little bit nostalgic, about that because we just don't, outside of like big Christopher Nolan productions, like you don't see a lot of movies that are shot in like multiple international locations, and it's just like a really well made film. And I think maybe that's a good segue to talking about the director Mark Forster and what he kind of brings to the table. Are you we've a couple of his other films we kind of written down the outline here: Monsters Ball, Kite Runner, Quantum of Solace, Stranger Than Fiction, which is one of my favorite movies, for sure.
That's where I came across Mark Forster, is Stranger Than Fiction, and I agree. Like, this movie has a super good sense of place, and Stranger Than Fiction really connected with me. I like that kind of dramedy sort of vision, and so I love that movie. I glommed onto it really quick. Has a great soundtrack, also, just for the record.
Yep.
And so then when it was not long after that, he was slated to do Quantum of Solace, the follow up to the extremely successful Casino Royale. My hopes and like were off the roof, because it was a director I was really into at the time, and obviously a Bond story. Mm-hmm. I don't know how you feel about Quantum of Solace, but there's two things I love about it. And number one is it has an amazing chase scene. I love car chase sequences. And it technically, for me, I always think of the chase scene at the very, very beginning of Quantum of Solace is the chase scene we missed out on in Casino Royale, because it is literally like the next scene after Casino Royale. And I always, when I watch Casino Royale, I end with the chase scene in Quantum of Solace. That's my true end of that movie. But if you ever notice in that movie, which is also a globe-trotting sort of thriller, every time they go to a different location, they shoot there, and you get that really strong sense of place, and that is squarely transferred over to this film. So I think it was good for him to do that movie, despite how you feel about it in the pantheon of Bond films. But it really was a great setup for this one.
Yeah, I know that Quantum of Solace is kind of like among Bond aficionados, it's often kind of ridiculed and like not well liked. I think it's pretty good. Like I don't have a huge problem with Quantum of Solace. I'm also not like the biggest Bond fan, really. I kind of think, like most of the Bond movies on average are kind of like about the same in terms of their, quality, at least the modern ones. I'm just not an aficionado like when it comes to Bond, but like it has like well executed action scenes, I think. And like that's what I think of when I think of Mark Forster. I think of like a steady hand who knows how to like kind of tactically put a movie together and is like very like commercially minded. Like he makes movies that people, like will go to see. His most recent movie that was, a pretty, moderate success, actually pretty big success was A Man Called Otto, the Tom Hanks film, which, I saw that I saw the movie on a plane, actually. A pretty good plane movie, but like, not great, kind of like a solid like C plus for me, but like appeals to a huge range of people, broad appeal, kind of movie like my parents love, not to like throw shade on my parents' taste or anything, but like, it's sort of, like it's a big tent kind of like crowd pleaser sort of movie. And like, that's what I think of when I think of, Mark Forster. And those directors honestly are kind of like, it's a rare breed, someone who can like work in multiple genres, who is just like really good at like putting a film together. I look at his filmography and I see like a lot of different kinds of things. I see action movies. I see these kind of like whimsical comedies. I think Stranger Than Fiction is probably his best movie. I don't know if you would agree with that.
This might be right there with it, and I can get into why I think that. But yeah.
Well, why would you give me your case for? I mean, World War Z being up there.
So it kind of goes back to the same point as like, why is this movie rewatchable? And I think, as much as the director was successful in making this movie a fun adventure, Brad Pitt is just as responsible. Not only is it his production company that kind of got this thing finally off the ground, but he carries this movie in such a definitive way. Like it is, I think Brad Pitt made this movie Mark Forster's best movie, because I think it's an excellent Brad Pitt movie. I think it really does what I want out of Brad Pitt very well.
Yeah, which is, I mean, just like being a movie star, right?
Yeah.
It's like kind of like being being in every scene and carrying every scene. He's like, this is a really good, solid like movie star performance, I think, from Brad Pitt. And like to the point where we were talking about this the other day, like, kind of before we getting ready for the recording, like you kind of don't really remember many other characters in this movie. Like they're pretty anonymous.
On purpose.
And, like there's some good character actors in this film for sure, but like it's not like no one else really gets a moment to like to shine, because like Brad Pitt is sort of like the star in every scene.
Well, here, let me throw this idea at you. Brad Pitt's character in this movie, Jerry, is pretty anonymous.
That's true.
You don't know anything about this guy. You don't know what he actually does. You get some inklings of an idea of what he maybe did, and just like these little bits and pieces. But this movie relies on Brad Pitt's persona, relies on his action hero creds up to that point to allow your brain to backfill his backstory and to rely on star power as a singular vehicle for narrative exposition.
Yeah.
Because there's not a lot of exposition in this movie. All these characters who are great, like kind of like go-to solid kind of background characters, they don't give you a lot. This movie does exposition pretty well. Like the first 20 minutes of this movie fly by.
Yeah.
So rapid pace, and you're getting information. And part of the trick of this movie is that they don't know what's going on. And so they're getting information in bits and pieces, as we are as well. And so it really feels like you are along for the ride of the discovery of each of these little pieces of the puzzle that enable them to kind of survive at the end of the day. So it's a weird movie in that it doesn't rely on storytelling in a traditional sense. It doesn't rely on exposition in a traditional sense. It relies a lot on star power and a lot on the mechanism of the story, which is people don't know what's going on.
Yeah. I think that's part of, I think a certain element of that, of the kind of like picking up on the story as you go along through inferences and, like little throwaway details that kind of like lend some, additional background and into the characters and the events. I feel like that's probably a little bit left over from the novel, which is which is written in such a way that it asks you to just sort of like dive into like, firsthand accounts, that might not, give you a lot of exposition, but you kind of have to like, pick things through as you go. But yeah, no, I think that's a great point about, Brad Pitt kind of like carrying this movie on his star power. And, it's, he's just very magnetic in this movie. I know you have a bit later about his hair in particular and how that his hair, the hair is a supporting character in the.
It is. I mean, the hair should certainly have gotten double billing at the top of the poster, which we should say iconic posters, like the movie, the art and the marketing around this movie, whether it's like the zombie horde climbing the walls of Jerusalem, or is the zombie horde hanging onto the part of a helicopter, like that stuff sticks with you. And I think it bodes well over time and ages well, and makes this film from like just like a thumbnail point of view in an app, like exciting to fire up.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you need that thumbnail in the streaming age to be appealing. Let's talk about some of the standout scenes and moments in the movie. I'll start like literally at the beginning. I think the opening credits and basically like the first 10 minutes of the movie are really rewatchable. I love the score, like the music that you kind of hear over the first over those credits, which is just a bunch of both actual and manufactured audio of like newsreel footage, essentially talking about like the slowly kind of expanding virus that's overtaking the planet, and it casts this immediately ominous tone. And then you're with Brad Pitt and his family outside Philadelphia, and then you're like in Philadelphia in a traffic jam, and you're in like my favorite scene in any sort of like disaster movie like this, which is where you realize everything's just kind of going to hell. And, you kind of learn a little bit about your main character and how they respond to how everything's going to hell. Of course, Brad Pitt's character is a all-time badass, in this movie. So, you learn that about him immediately. But I love that opening, those like opening 10 minutes, particularly like the insane kind of like Philadelphia traffic jam, zombie horde moment.
Yeah, I think I've watched this numerous times, and I always forget that when the cop is yelling at him to get in his car, and then all of a sudden he gets mowed down by the runaway garbage truck. It surprises me every time, and that really is where you're like, oh man, we're gonna buckle up here, and like this is gonna be a crazy ride. I like stories, and we've talked about this in other episodes, but I like stories where the main character has that notion of hyper competency. You know what I mean? Like you can just tell like this person is like completely situationally aware, extremely competent, can get their way out of any situation. I just like that kind of character as a main character in general. It's like, I think something that a lot of us probably aspire or wish that we were like and would be like in a scary situation. But Brad Pitt wears that hat really, really well. And I think they do a good job of creating really instant connection with his family too. I mean, again, like I look at that from like a screenwriting point of view, at all the little things they do and don't do in order to create an instant bond between him and his family that really does assist his motivation and carry throughout the rest of the film. Even if it's just like, I mean, literally that first sequence is not that long. I mean, they get kind of through the first act of the film about 20 minutes, but like you are 5 minutes in when you are already like locked and loaded with this fam.
Yeah, immediately. I mean, the things that you learn basically immediately are that he's like retired from like a dangerous job, and he's like grateful to be home with his family making pancakes and not like doing something in a dangerous in a third world country or whatever, even though you don't know exactly like what that is. You just know that like he did something very difficult and challenging in a previous life. And then like I love that moment where the cop is mowed down by the runaway garbage truck. Like that's that moment of competence where you see Brad Pitt kind of like kick into gear. He realizes this is your way out. Like this is how you get out. You follow that truck and you get out of the traffic jam. And then like that's when things sort of start coming together a little bit. At least subconsciously you start to realize that this is this is a person with some skills, who you're going to be following, throughout the movie, who's going to be able to like kind of, like solve problems like as they come about. And it seems credible to me.
Totally.
Yeah. And like, that's all like, again, that's 10 minutes in, like that, that Philadelphia scene happens, before like the 15-minute mark. So it's really, it happens really fast. And then you get those dang fast zombies running around Philadelphia, smashing their heads into windshields. What were your thoughts when you first saw that? Like that's a pretty dramatic image in a movie like this.
Like I think I don't think before this film I thought of zombies as fast. I always like in kind of more the moaning, slow Shaun of the Dead style zombies, not thinking much about these like you said, hyper athletic versions of them that are kind of when in a big group are an unstoppable force, and it's striking and shocking and fun and thrilling all at once. So I mean, I think this kind of set a new tone for zombies moving forward from this film, at least in my experience with the movies. But other people would be like, no, they were fast zombies in this movie too, and I don't know.
Well, it's hard to find like the slow zombie to be all that scary after you've seen, like these extremely fast, lunging, jumping, athletic zombies. Like it's just a whole different kettle of fish, as they say. What's a standout scene for you?
I mean, I think it's hard to ignore the whole Jerusalem sequence. Like that is a really intriguing idea. Just the whole idea that they have this like technique for establishing like strange out of left field ideas and how you prepare for them. And I think it's called the 10th man or something like that. This situational sort of I don't know what you'd call it, but like internal debate on how to like prepare for the worst case scenarios.
Yeah, it's a really interesting concept. So the idea is that if you have like a problem to solve and 9 people are in agreement on how to solve that problem, the 10th person has to take the alternate view and work the problem from another direction, because the idea is that there's you get like tunnel vision in a group environment and you miss things, and so it forces a different perspective on something, which I think is a really it is a pretty interesting idea.
Yeah, so that turned that whole sequence into something that felt really like strategic, and then also you see how despite their best preparations, things go awry, and the whole idea of the zombie tower, the zombies climbing up each other to like scale the wall, is terrifying and like visually arresting. And that really cool guard that he's then paired with, it's the gal with like the super short hair that you don't even. I don't even think we know her name through the course of the film.
She does give her name at one point. I forgot. It's I clocked it when I was rewatching it before this, but you're right. She's pretty anonymous.
But like, what a cool character and what a cool chemistry and connection they instantly get. Yeah.
Yep. The Jerusalem sequence is great. That image of the zombie tower scaling the wall is probably like the key image, I think, of the movie, and like the chaos that happens once the first one's over, and obviously like it's literally kind of like all downhill from there.
I think the sequence where again, like time plays an interesting role in this film, like the countdown from bite to infected is an interesting time-based dynamic in this. And so he's constantly like either seeing if he is infected or counting down for someone else, but like to the countdown to the arm chop is like a really cool moment that kind of bookends the Jerusalem sequence. And is again shocking and exhilarating for some weird reason to watch, but like cool character that again, without a lot of backstory, without a lot of like scene building between the two of them, for some reason they are able to gravitate towards each other and be a cool duo for like the rest of the film.
Yeah. Right after the Jerusalem sequence, those two find themselves on a plane getting out of Jerusalem, and I think that's where like that connection is really kind of like fostered. He gives her some medical care. They, he does like the sterilization thing with a little bottle of vodka, and they each like have a drink, and like there's a bonding moment there. Yeah, exactly. And that plane scene where you have an outbreak, eventually, which it's going to happen. Like as soon as you get like that many people on a plane, that like there's going to be an outbreak. They're gonna have like a chaotic situation in the cabin. You're just kind of waiting for it. But I think it does work. Like that's a really cool action sequence in a very confined space, and leads to a pretty terrifying plane crash sequence. And that's another standout scene for me. Everything that happens on that plane.
Yeah, it showcases how bitey their zombies are as well. Very bitey.
Yeah, for sure. Very bitey. So they crash in. Is it Wales?
Wales, England. Yeah.
So and then they make their way to like a research laboratory where that's where they spend the rest of the movie. And I love that, like that whole final sequence where they're kind of like figuring out, like how to get into the wing of the building that's zombie infested. And it has like some really tense moments. And what I really love about it is that, like the movie ends and it doesn't end with like this like ridiculous, insane action sequence. It has like, as these things go, as these blockbusters go, the ending's kind of quiet and reserved. And that's something that I really appreciated about this movie.
So it's interesting. I think, and I've read a little bit that that whole sequence at the end there was where several rewrites kind of like landed in this kind of way to end the film in this enclosed space. There's two things that happen there. One of them you could maybe even call out as like a critique of the film. So far up until that point in the movie, like we've basically seen a bunch of super fast CG zombies that are scary and have a certain vibe. In the latter half of the movie, we get away from these super fast CG zombies and get into real life actors who are makeup and hair and wardrobe, who do run, but not like crazily athletic, but run really fast, But there's a couple standout performances of a couple of, I think, actors who are portraying zombies in ways that I thought were terrifying and really effective, and like should be getting some kind of award for their zombie performance. Like, I don't know if I've seen like a straight up just, painted like makeup, hair and makeup sort of version of a zombie that is kind of that scary. It's the female zombie that they have locked in their wing, who is like banging her head against the wall and looking terrifying. And then the other is the final kind of like boss zombie that is like hovering outside his door, waiting for him to kind of inoculate himself. And that guy's freaky and he's good at what he did. Like, it's a good performance.
Yeah, no, there is a lot of like the zombies go from being I mean, they're still fast, but like they're snarlier. That like that snarling becomes their signature.
Are you invoking my last name for some reason here? That's snarly.
Oh, I didn't. Maybe are you a zombie? Kind of like
seriously.
Are you
just in the mornings?
Dead? Yeah.
No, but it is a tonally different. Let's be honest. It's a tonal shift from like the threat, and that seems a little dissonant to me, and maybe like a little bit of like because obviously they wrote something that they had to be able to perform with less CG and stuff like that. But I still think it's effective, and I still think the ending, like you said, is a left turn from your typical, like, you're not. It does have that weird. I don't know how I feel about the the weird kind of voiceover montage at the end of just people around the world doing different zombie battles.
Yeah.
I don't know if I care that much about it. I think them arriving in Nova Scotia and hugging out is fine for me, but it still leaves you with that a little bit of like, we're all in this together sort of vibe.
Yeah. No, I think I mean, the voiceover stuff, I think is clearly kind of like trying to draw a connection to the book. Where like the whole idea is you have all these different accounts, and that's the thing that I think people criticize this movie for, is it's solely from the perspective of the Brad Pitt character, and people who love the novel. And again, full disclosure, I haven't read the novel, but the thing that people love about the novel is that it has like all these different points of view from like around the history of this zombie war. So I think they're trying to like insert a little bit of that into the movie, at certain times, to sort of like underscore that like this is still like the World War Z movie. Like it's not just Brad Pitt, even though it is like just
so this is where we get to the whole idea of the hot take that I told you, as like,
yeah, let's hear it.
Despite this being World War Z and supposed to feel like the whole world is in it together, I don't think this movie works without Brad Pitt. I don't think I'd be interested in rewatching it without Brad Pitt. I think he brings so much star power. That is literally the thing that I enjoy rewatching the most, is just a character / actor that I am into. I don't know that this movie works with a different actor. I don't know. Maybe a Tom Cruise could pull it off. I don't know.
So you're not interested in exploring like the ins and outs of like the zombie disease itself. Like you're just, unless Brad Pitt's doing it, maybe.
I would. It's like I'm more into him going on another adventure with this character, than the zombie aspect of it. And maybe that's heresy or something, but that's how I feel like if I'm being honest about it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, the filmmakers put you and all of us in that position by kind of like elevating his role in this movie, to the point where like he's carrying it, from scene to scene to scene.
Not alone though,
because the source material is, the source material is a very different sort of animal, in that it, like, the whole point is that it has all of these different perspectives.
Yeah. I mean, he's not alone though. He has his hair. Let's be honest.
He does. He does have his hair. He does have his hair. There's been a lot of talk, or there was, originally when this movie came out, and at various times, since it came out, as it sort of like bubbles up in the culture from time to time, about a potential sequel. Would you be interested in seeing a sequel if it didn't have Brad Pitt?
I don't know. I would say I would be like mixed, and I'd have to like do some studying and kind of decide. However, if it did, I'd be all in. There you go.
Yeah. I mean, I would certainly watch a sequel with Brad Pitt. I think artistically, the better decision would be to do something that's more in line with like the original source material, and to kind of like tell this, like the story of the zombie wars from other perspectives looking back. I think that's like where, that's where I would want to see a sequel go. It seems unlikely at this point that we're going to get, a sequel. It seems like everyone's kind of like moved on. But yeah, that's my feeling, that, the sequel would kind of like necessarily have to tell other parts of the story, because they're, like the implication throughout this film is that like it's this, obviously it's a worldwide event, and I'd want to see a worldwide event from other perspectives, at some point.
Yeah. So this comes to the point where I guess we get to talk a little bit about watch spotting, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, let's talk about the watch that Brad Pitt wears in the film.
Yeah, so I didn't know this. It was the good folks at D1 Milano who kind of told me that this brand is featured in this film, and it's again a Terra Cielo Mare orienteering. It's an orienteering model that was a previous generation, and kind of I would call it maybe the bigger brother of the watch that I'm wearing today. So it's called the orienteering PVD. Literally bigger brother, in that it will. In this movie, it's a 47 millimeter diameter on that watch, but again has the internal compass with a second crown to manipulate it. You can see it pretty accurately and vividly when he's, like you mentioned before, giving that medical care to the Israeli soldier that's with him. And yeah, I think when you look at the watch just out of, off his arm and in context, it is definitely the type of vibe that you would expect to see on this kind of character. So I think it's a really good bit of watch casting for this film.
Mm-hmm.
The whole idea of this orienteering watch is like, I think it comes into perfect play with a globetrotting style of movie talent, screenwriting and storytelling. If you compare the previous model, the orienteering PVD, to the model I'm wearing, which is the orienteering quota, if I compare the two, I think I really do prefer the newer, like less expensive little brother model that I'm wearing on my wrist, the 44 millimeter. I think they're both cool watches. They both come from the same visual lineage. You can tell that very clearly. But I think it's a better execution in that it really has those unique crowns, the kind of those big, beefy, large diameter crowns. And it's just a little bit easier to read, in my opinion, because there's the information, I think, is organized better on the dial. The outer ring that kind of manages your compass bearings, and as well as the countdown timers that it has that you can use with it as well.
Yeah. It's a cool piece. And you mentioned the one you're wearing is less expensive than the version seen on Brad Pitt's wrist. I think the original version, the one seen in the film, that's like a $6,000 or $7,000 watch, right? It's a pretty
correct
high end piece. Yeah. Which I think that kind of makes sense in a way for that character. You can kind of imagine, this sort of like, like special forces guy, like probably like he's probably come into some money at some point,
mm-hmm.
and he probably like a very expensive but very, very niche and under the radar watch. I think like makes sense for someone like that.
Yeah, with a PVD coating as this model has on my wrist as well. Like just the blacked out sort of kind of special operator vibe is apparent. So yeah, it was fun to get. It's always fun when a movie that you love and watch a lot, you get a chance to connect with it on another level, and it's great to know that this watch is fairly on his wrist the entire time, and made kind of the part of the journey of this making of this movie was through this brand and this watch. So again, just big thanks to Terra Cielo Mare for sponsoring this episode and bringing this particular watch spotting moment to our attention.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really very like I said, very under the radar, very niche watch spot. But I think once you know a little bit about the watch, it definitely does kind of add like a layer of depth to the character. It's one of those things that just kind of like makes a lot of sense, I think, when you start thinking it through. Totally. I want to talk a little bit about some movies that might pair well with World War Z, but before that, I want to give you a chance, Kyle, to talk about Brad Pitt's hair and other examples of movies where his hair kind of like becomes a supporting character. This is something you flagged, just something you wanted to address in the movie.
I appreciate you humoring me, but I did work on my list of the top 5 Brad Pitt movie hairstyles just for you.
So I have an idea of what number 1 should be just in my head. Okay. So I'm curious to hear your list. So let's go. Okay, if you want to count it back from,
I will count it back, and then I have 2 honorable mentions as well.
That's great.
All right. So number 5 on top 5 Brad Pitt movie hairstyles, I have Fury. Okay. So in that movie, he's got kind of like the super buzzed sides and back with like the slicked top. It's something that image is now popping up in menswear memes a lot. It's like a look that people are trying to go for these days. So it definitely made my top 5.
Okay.
Number 4 is very specific. It is the buzz cut hair in Fight Club. So he has 2 different hairstyles through the course of the movie Fight Club. He starts off with more like that classic kind of 90s spiky hair, and then in the latter half of the film, it's like the tight buzz. Mm-hmm. So dude, the tight buzz is where it's at. It's definitely up there for me, and it made the list. Number 4.
Okay.
So number 3, I'm going with this movie, World War Z. I put it in. This his hair is a character in this movie. It moves like it has a life of its own in certain moments, and yeah, he just looks cool, and it works really well. There's a few different long Brad Pitt hair movies out there, and this is one of the best.
Okay,
all right. Number 2, a movie that you and I have already spoken about on this podcast, because he's got a perfectly sculpted do in this one, is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Okay.
Yeah, I just think that it has like that throwback vibe. It's like perfectly coiffed, and it is a beautiful head of hair in that movie for sure. And then last but not least, the number 1 best Brad Pitt movie hairstyle of all time. And this was verified by my wife within like 30 seconds, or not even 3 seconds. Legends of the Fall.
Okay, I was gonna. So I had a couple of ideas for number 1. Legends of the Fall was up there. The other thought I had was Interview with the Vampire.
Oh,
or True Romance. Floyd. Also,
there you go.
Like, these are like the long hair.
Yeah.
So Pitt.
So it's a long hair battle, because I looked online last night at lists that I did not agree with at all, but like a lot of people.
Are there a lot of top Brad Pitt hairstyles?
There are, but
porn or the internet, I don't know. Honestly, I'm happy to.
People were clocking Troy in that list too, and I'm just I'm sorry. The long hair with Brad Pitt is literally at its best with Legends of the Fall. There's no doubt about it. That's the one.
Okay,
and that was verified by my wife within like 3 seconds. A couple honorable mentions. You mentioned a couple that I agree with completely, but I will definitely say I liked the mustachioed slick look of Inglourious Bastards, Brad.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good one. And then here is a deep cut for you. The pompadour in Cool World.
Oh, yeah, that is a deep cut. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So those are my top 5 best Brad Pitt movie hairstyles.
I think we should cut that out for social. Just you doing the top 5 Brad Pitt hairstyle. I think we'll cross over into a lot of different algorithms. I think
there you go.
If we can get that on the old.
It's all Instagram. About the algorithms.
Yeah, for sure. So we mentioned earlier, neither of us are like huge like zombie movie fans. So I was sort of like thinking about. We had originally thought we would do like top 5. Favorite zombie movies. I don't know that I can recommend 5 zombie movies. I just don't have. It's just not a part of the film world I have a great literacy in. But I think there are interesting movies that like pair well with World War Z that may or may not be zombie movies. And the first one that comes to mind for me is Steven Soderbergh's Contagion, which is a movie that again, similar to this movie, but even more so, takes on a completely new light post-pandemic. And I will say, during the pandemic, if you watch this movie, which I did, it had honestly it had a weird sort of like calming effect for me. Like it didn't trip my anxiety or anything, because ultimately they they figure things out, in the movie, and it it's bad, but it's ultimately manageable. At least that's how I read it. Others may disagree, but Contagion's like another movie that it has this sort of propulsive energy to it. It's paced in a similar way. I think to World War Z, you're just going from one kind of event to the next. It's episodic. It's a movie I really like a lot. I think it's a great thriller. And there's a lot of parallels, I think, between the two.
Can I tell you my first time and only time seeing Contagion?
Yeah.
I was on a plane, and the person next to me had a very, very bad cough, and they were watching Contagion, and I could not watch their screen the entire time, and it sucked.
Do you think that they turned on Contagion knowing that you were watching it and knowing they had a cough just to mess with you?
Yes, I do. I literally think that.
Do, honestly.
That's nice. You're that guy. Wait, it was you. No.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a big Steven Soderbergh fan. I think Contagion's among his best films. Really great ensemble cast, just lots of great actors in it. Highly recommended if you haven't seen it. It's it is a little triggering, I have to say.
Yeah.
If you lived through the pandemic, which if you're listening to this podcast, you did. So yeah, Contagion is kind of to me the first movie I think of when I think of movie pairings with this, with World War Z. How about you, Kyle? Is there a movie that you would recommend as a double feature?
It's not going to be a big surprise. I'm a big fan of Shaun of the Dead, so I actually did double watch these two movies together during the pandemic. We watched World War Z followed by Shaun of the Dead, which is just like a great palate cleanser. And so I think watching those two movies together in that order, World War Z being first, great night at the movies. You can't go wrong.
Yep. No, Shaun of the Dead's a really, really entertaining movie. Totally different spin on the zombie.
Equally as bitey, though.
Yeah, no, for sure. Definitely has some bitey moments. Another movie that I'll throw out there that I think is often, kind of like discussed with World War Z, came out several years before, but it's also a star vehicle in a similar way, is I Am Legend, which of course stars Will Smith. Also a literary adaptation, also a movie that a sequel is discussed. I actually think there might be a sequel like in development, or maybe in the works on I Am Legend, even as we speak. How do you feel about I Am Legend?
I saw it in the theater the day it came out and remember vividly watching it. I liked it. I thought it was good. I have not seen it since. Not at all. Not once.
It doesn't have the same sort of like rewatchable quality as World War Z. I think just because it's just a very different kind of movie. There's like I like certain like conceits of I Am Legend. I love the vision of this like empty New York. I think that's like a really striking thing.
It's been overgrown and I like him hunting from a Mustang is kind of fun. Like that.
Yeah, I like that he's scene. Like he's gone like clearly he's like gone to the Met and like raided their. Like, he's brought like paintings back to his apartment and. It's just kind of like having fun by himself in New York City. I think there's like a lot of like cool details like that in I Am Legend. Like Will Smith has his own sort of like star quality, obviously.
Sure.
Very different than Brad Pitt. But also kind of it's like worth seeing, I think, if you're interested in zombie movies from this era. Anything else that you'd consider pairing with World War Z?
I can just say there's a couple like TV shows. Like we talked earlier just about like I don't have this huge fondness for post-apocalyptic stuff in general. I mean, I do like the Mad Maxes of the world and stuff like that. But I think if people haven't seen shows like Station 11, I think that's a great series. That's kind of like a post-infection sort of storyline that I absolutely love that series and have watched it like I think 3 times now and ready for.
How have we never talked about Station 11? That's one of my absolute favorite series.
Oh yeah,
It's
fantastic,
incredible show. Highly recommend that to everybody out there. It's great.
And then also just comedy wise, Last Man on Earth, great comedy series that plays with a lot of the tropes that these movies play with and has tons of fun with them.
Yep, that's a good one. Kyle, thank you so much for joining me to talk about World War Z. I think a pretty interesting, little artifact of the early 2010s. It's a fun movie. It's always streaming somewhere, so definitely look it up and start her up if you haven't seen it in a while. It's
one of those rewatchables that doesn't have any right to be rewatchable yet totally is.
Yeah, no, it's solid. And also a big thank you to Terra Cielo Mare for making this episode possible. We'll have a lot more information on their brand and watches on the website in the very near term, right, Kyle?
Yeah. Not only will we be having some more information about their watches, I'm going to say it now because Kat told me that this would come out at a similar time. We are going to be doing for the holidays the gift guide to the zombie apocalypse brought to you by Terra Cielo Mare. So that'll be a lot of fun. Watch out for that on wardandwound.com. But yes, the gift guide to the zombie apocalypse.
Very exciting. Something to look forward to and practical as well.
You better believe it.
The zombie apocalypse could happen at any moment. You never know. You have to be prepared.
Totally. Yeah. Thanks, man.
Thank you, Kyle. And thank you to everyone for listening to this episode of Time on Screen. We'll be back with another episode soon. Until then, take care.